Hello, welcome to Have a Nice Life, a career change survival guide podcast. This is Pippi Kessler, an organizational psychologist, career coach, and leadership coach.
And hello, I'm Hadassah Damien, a money coach and business strategist. So, friends, in the last few episodes of this podcast, we dug into criteria setting, which is you understanding what you need from working, what you might want, what you might see as important to you to experience or contribute. So, if you want to do some of that imagining and you're just dropping in, go back to episodes 3 or 4.
In this episode and in the next few episodes, we're going to dig into ways to research and expand your ideas about what's possible with work for you. This is important because thinking of new things that you've never imagined before is really hard, but it also is an essential part of this work. And the emotional tool that you're going to need at this stage in the process is just to have the courage to explore different options for yourself, and also just a little bit of time where you can focus on brainstorming.
That's right. The goal of this section, step 4, research and expanding, is to break open the possibilities in your mind and expand the range of ideas that your mind will accept as what's even feasible. In political science, we have this concept called Overton's window. What can even be on the table when we're having a conversation? And sometimes there's certain things that just couldn't even be on the table because nobody had even thought of them, or they just weren't even seen as possible. So we're trying to get you to see new things as even possible. And where we're going to start with that today is on the topic of money. So I'm going to talk about some financial imagination techniques. But what I want to start with is a little statement of fact, which is that there are non-evil people who are out there today making decent incomes and able to take care of themselves, and they are doing jobs that do not destroy their spirits. So this is true. This is a possible thing. I want you to know it's possible. People do it. They do it without having to hurt themselves, and they do it without richy families to bankroll it. I'm a money coach. I've talked to more than 1,000 people about what they do and what is going on with their money. And I can tell you for a fact, there are people from single parent families. There are adopted people. There are people who are self-emancipated as youth. There are people with all kinds of different abilities and disabilities, queer people, polyamorous people, people who had kids early, people with lots of kids, people of color, indigenous people who didn't even bother looking at this till their 40s, artists, neurospicy and neuroatypical people, and basically every type of person. In my experience, having met many people, I have seen examples of all these types of people who are not evil, who are making decent incomes, who are able to take care of themselves, who are doing jobs that do not destroy their spirits. There's lots of examples that we can probably see of that not happening, but I want you to know that it is possible. I also want you to know that I, Hadassah Damien, would not have believed that as of 10 years ago. And I would have resented anyone who said that was true. And I would have yelled at them, and I would have assumed they were coming from a lot of privilege that made them miss the obvious truth that actually that's impossible. And so I deeply, totally understand the suspicion that might arise for some of you. And look, I'm not saying it's guaranteed or that it's easy or that it will happen to anyone who just tries hard enough or uses our time-tested method, but I'm saying it's possible. And you have to believe that something is possible to even consider it. And I really want you to consider what's possible financially. Not in some vague winning the lottery, discovered as an influencer, overnight billionaire way, but in a very specific to you, size to your needs kind of way. And even opening our minds to what's financially possible can bring up fear for people. And we live in a world that really functions using a lot of fear and control, like the fear that we won't have enough, the fear of harm and pain that will come to us or those we love if we don't have enough. And that fear is based in reality, right, of what many of us may have experienced or witnessed or is ancestrally in our bodies. And that fear, it can control a lot of people. You might have seen it at work in a parent or in a friend or in yourself. And I can't tell you that fear is just going to go away But I can tell you that starting to construct your idea of what's enough financially is one tool to start to fight back against that fear. And so the exercises that we're going to think through in this section can help, but I want to take a step back and ask, what do we know about the amount of money that people need to feel they have enough? So this year, 2024, a new study was released that looked at the cost of living in the biggest cities in the United States, and it used what's called the 50-30-20 budget, which is this very rough back of the napkin that asks you to say, what if your bills take 50% of your money, and then 20% of your money goes to saving or paying off debt, and then 30% of your money is left for whatever the hell you want, which is a perfectly fine rule of thumb budget. And they said, based on that, we want to say how much is the cost of living for people, if that needs to be 50% of their budget. How much money do people need to make? And what they found was that on average, in 99 of the biggest American cities, the minimum salary needed to be able to cover all of this was $96,000. And of course, in bigger cities or more expensive cities, that number went up. New York City was the most expensive, with people needing $138,000 on average to cover cost of living, plus debt, plus retirement, plus having some money left over.
That is horrifying. I mean,
that is validating about what it was like to live in New York City on not that much money.
Yeah, totally. And this is the other paradox that is always present. So whenever we're talking about these things, Hadassah talking about this is not saying it should be that way. Just saying right now it looks like it is that way right now. And it's never a choice between figuring out what you need and accepting as good the current condition. Of course, always we can continue to try to change the fundamental conditions as we try to figure out how to live within them. But I also find it very helpful to just hear that study, because it's validating, again, just there's nothing wrong with you if there are things about this money stuff that is really challenging. This is a really complicated situation to try to navigate. And it's intense how high that number is. And also, again, there's nothing wrong with you if you resonate with that, of being like, oh yeah, it is really hard to make it work in a big city.
Totally. And also part of why I give you all data, these factoids, there's a couple reasons. Number one is that when you go do the exercise a little later, you might come up with a big number. And I don't want you to think that you're doing something wrong or that there's something wrong with you or what you need. There's a lot of data to support that life is hella expensive. You're within a systemic problem space, right? Healthcare, extremely expensive. Childcare, extremely expensive. Housing, extremely expensive. I also want to say that it's okay if you don't need that much money. There's plenty of reasons why you might not. You might not live in one of the 99 most expensive cities. You might have figured out how to secure your housing more cheaply somewhere along the way. You might be sharing costs with somebody. You might be child-free, or your kids might have moved out. You might have lower healthcare costs. There's tons of reasons why, or ways that you can think about constructing your life that don't require that amount of money. What I want you all thinking about is both imagination and possibility, what might be possible, because there are jobs that pay that. And I also want you to think about the money you need on purpose, because what I really don't want happening, and what I've seen happen, is that people are like, oh, great, a good paying job is what, 50, 60K a year? Great. And then you get it and you're like, oh shit, I really actually need 75K so I can pay off my student loans and cover all of my things and not be making brutal choices. Money on purpose. It's also okay to take a job that doesn't pay as much as what you need as a way to get towards what you need. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but in any ways, this is how the world should be. But when you go ahead and set this number and do your financial imagination, it doesn't mean that that's immediately where you have to go or immediately your next step. But imagining what's possible is so useful. Like for me, when I got my first salary job, I was making $32K as an administrative assistant at Columbia University. And I was like, I'm rich, rich. And then I realized that once you have a salary job, you're paying for healthcare. And I wanted to put money into retirement because I was mad about having to pay my student loans. And I was like, whatever I'm paying them, I'm paying me. And trying to wrap your arms around all these different pieces takes money, honey. Okay, I want to take us into this exercise, and I want to take you back to the exercise that Pippi gave us 2 episodes ago about anti-ableist self-acceptance, because I also want to point back to this idea of really actually thinking about what you need to be well. And I don't mean like consumer self-care. I'm thinking about the fundamentals of your health and your wellness and your joy and your ability to be connected to others. And I want you to remember that it's okay to want those things and to figure out how to make space for those things. And I would like to encourage you to not compromise your imagination around what you need to be well. So with that, let's get into this exercise on financial imagination. So I like to think of this as the 4-number exercise. So if you did the money exercise a little bit ago, you might have identified an income that you need for yourself to cover some upcoming spending needs. And just super short on that exercise, it's what do you need to cover your basics and some of your upcoming stuff? What's the income that you need? So that's number 1. What are your next year's personal spending goals? And it can be actually useful to think about this both monthly, but also annually. Many jobs will offer an annual salary, which sometimes we have to then break down monthly. So, for example, you might be thinking, all right, I figured out that I need to have money for my rent and my food and my bills, and I want to be able to pay down my credit cards, and I want to be able to save for a vacation, and I want to be able to save up over the next couple of years for a break or a big trip or a sabbatical. So I looked at that over time. It looks like I need about $3,900 a month to pay my basics, to pay my bills, to pay my debt, to get some savings going, and to have some money left over to have some fun around here.
Yeah.
$3,900 a month after taxes is $60,000 a year in a pre-tax salary. Or you might do this exercise and say, well, I need all those things, but I also need to be able to pay for childcare. And I'm making sure that I have some money left over for my mom. Or it's really important to me to be putting extra towards retirement, or saving for top surgery, or saving for a down payment. So my number is coming out to $6,500 a month after tax, which is $100K a year before taxes. Back to that number. So whatever it is, step 1, think about what your next year's personal spending goals are. That number's going to look different for all of you, but come up with a 1-year estimate. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a range. I don't want you to go deep into the details of how much you spend on Netflix versus this versus that. Just look at what you spent over the last 3 months. Take some averages if you're getting stuck. Add some in for things that would be really ideal for you. Savings goals, things like that. Because I want you to move on to the next 3. So the next number to come up with is an income that 1 or 2 people that you know makes. And I want you to go ask 1 or 2 people, how much money do you make? I don't want you to guess. I want you to find out. Just 2 people who have jobs. Any kind of job. Doesn't have to be the fanciest job. Just how much money do you make? So maybe you find out that your mom is a teacher and makes $78,000 because she's been at it for 20 years. Bless her. Maybe you find out that your best friend's cousin is a public defender and they make whatever they make. Just find out the actual salaries of 1 or 2 people. I'm not talking about internet research. Ask humans. That's number 2. Number 3, I want you to find at least 1 person or imagine 1 income number that is realistic but feels big, whatever big means to you. I want you to make it more than any of the other numbers that you've already come up with. You're welcome to guess or imagine, or maybe this is the moment to go talk to your friend who seems to have some sort of fancy job and you don't know what it is. So maybe this is like a friend from high school who's now a game designer, or maybe a friend of a friend that has a fancy law job. What do they do and how much money do they make? The goal with this third set of numbers is just to open that window of possibility a little bit more. And then the fourth number is an income that seems like the minimum possible to live on and be okay. And so this is your absolutely cannot go below this number. You might know what this number is because you might already be living on this. You might be like, whatever it is today, cannot go below that. This is already too little. In which case, that minimum number might actually need to be a little higher. So you're coming out with 4 sets of numbers. What is your personal spending goal for next year? Like, how much money do you think you're going to need next year? What is the income, actual income of 1 or 2 people that you know? What is a big income? And what is the minimum livable income for you? And listing out seemingly random annual incomes might seem silly, but there's a couple of reasons that I want you to do this. I want you to not avoid specific numbers, even if they make you uncomfortable. Putting the specific numbers in your mind, even if they seem random, they help you start to generate a relationship to numbers, even if they seem unreasonable right now, even if they seem out there. You can also start to decide to focus your work explorations on ways to make these specific numbers more achievable and be really aware about what you're choosing. Again, not signing up for that $55,000 a year job if really what you need is 80 grand to pay off your debt, take care of business, get the acupuncture you need, and be well, right? I also have you call out the minimum number specifically on its own to make it clear that all these other numbers are not meant to be the minimum. We're not intentionally going to look for the least. We are intentionally going to look for enough. Sometimes we're thinking non-minimally, and that can be really challenging for those of us who are used to denying what we need, making hard decisions, and minimizing our needs. But this is not about minimizing. This exercise is about expanding what you think is possible. We give a little asterisk and give a kind of sub-exercise. So some of you out there might be thinking about the things that you want to do with your life, but you don't need to earn all of your money. Maybe you have a nest egg. Maybe you have a high-earning partner. Maybe you have a really clear income stream that already comes in and you're just trying to think about part of your life. So you can do this exercise with a little variation to it, which is thinking about, first off, still, what are your financial needs, right? That first number. Still, get all of these different numbers from income of 1 or 2 people, a big income, your minimum viable income. But you're essentially just going to say, what are my total personal spending goals? And what money is already coming in from my nest egg? And therefore, what else do I want to earn? So if, for example, you came up with your minimum livable income as needing $2,500 a month because maybe you already own your house or you have very cheap housing, and you think about what you need for next year, you're going to go to school, you want to be able to travel, have some stuff, and you can come up with a total personal spending number, for example, $60K. You could subtract money that is coming in from your nest egg or family gift or other job or royalties or whatever it is to then say, okay, great. For example, that's $20K. So then you're going to say, okay, great. I need $60K. $20K is already coming in. So $40K is what I need to earn. Your total life cost might be more than that, but the amount of money that you're trying to come up with and generate might be less. This exercise should also help you to start to wrap your head around your needs and wants. And we started that in the exercise that we did a couple episodes ago, thinking about what are my income needs in the first place. But we have you do it this additional other way because creating a relationship to numbers takes a little while. And thinking about it and then thinking about it in another way is really helpful because it just gets you more used to saying, what are these numbers that I need? And what does it mean that I need them? What's the content of that? The last thing I will say before wrapping up this exercise, there's a couple challenges to this exercise that are very similar to the challenges when you potentially did the last exercise. Many people are not as clear on how much spending they want or need to do on like consumer stuff, fun stuff, going out, traveling. Either we're not paying attention to it or we're not used to doing it. I invite you to make realistic estimates. And if you're someone who is interested in shifting their relationship to consumer spending, it's okay to set these numbers in your mind as goals. But if you're someone who's like always spending a lot of money on consumer stuff, it's probably not realistic for you to set your goal to do no consumer spending, right? So I want the thing you're coming up with to be realistic for you. Again, fear of scarcity, coming up with these numbers might bring up a lot of discomfort about what's not happening today or about what you're not seeing as happening for people that you care about. You coming up with a sustainable amount of money for you to live on doesn't mean that you don't want that for other people. It doesn't mean that it's right that other people don't have it. It's just you asking the question of what might be enough and why. What goes into enough for me? I just want to name that. Sometimes I hear people say things like, I'm not good at numbers, or I can't keep all these numbers in my head. I believe that if you're listening to this, you have a cell phone, and that cell phone is a calculator, and that you could just plug things into the calculator as you go. You can write things down on a piece of paper and add them up on your calculator. Sometimes we feel like we have to get numbers perfect to be right at them, and I want you to let go of that perfectionism and allow your numbers to be rough and be close enough to make sense to you. You don't have to be perfect, but you don't have to be good at math to do this. You just literally have to bust out your calculator and think through some numbers step by step, okay? And those are the three main things that might get in your way of thinking about these 4 numbers, putting 4 salary or income numbers in front of you, and just starting to percolate on what it means that there's different incomes that different people earn. So that is our exercise on financial imagination. Thanks, friends.
Wow, thanks, Hadassah. It's so helpful to hear you talk in this really concrete way about this topic and to demystify how do you figure this out and how do you talk about this when you're working with people on this question. I remember the first time that I did an exercise like this, I was in my 20s, and I also, my salary was $32,000 a year, and I did this exercise, and the number I came up with was $60,000. I was like, fuck. I was so upset. I was like, that's impossible. But it meant that many years later, when I was offered a different job that paid me that much, it was like I just heard a dinging sound, like ding, because I had heard that number before. And just that idea of how it can change things and how it can change us psychologically to just have spent time with different numbers before, even if it's not real yet that those are the numbers that we're making in our lives. I think it's really powerful. I know for me, it helped me not be afraid in that moment and to just say, I've heard this number before. Okay. Even though this has never happened to me before, I did that exercise a bunch of years ago at that workshop, and so I can have a relationship to this.
This makes me think about when I got my first fancy technology job. They offered me $120,000, and anything over $100,000 was like complete riches in my mind. I was like, I've never even thought about a bigger number than this. This is unfathomably wonderful. But then some other little thing inside my mind was like, no matter what you're offered in a job, you have to ask for more. And I was like, I don't even know how much. What do you mean more? So I had to rapid fire develop a relationship with a slightly larger number than that, just so I could, in the moment of negotiating, only like semi blackout when I asked for 125, right? Like I just had to get close enough to be able to get the words out of my mouth without stopping myself, right? And so this type of exercise, it's not like, it doesn't have to be an immediate light bulb switch, but just getting that relationship with these numbers so that they're in the window of possibility. That's all we're trying to do here. Yeah.
Well, Hadassah, thanks for being you. Thanks for learning about all of these money things that can seem intimidating or out of reach. And then thanks for being willing to talk about it in this very kind of realistic way that's not denying the unfairness of the situation, and also that's not telling people that the only option is to suffer and die.
It is not the only option, correct. All right, friends, stay hydrated, do your exercise, and we're going to come back with more things to open your mind up in the next episode.
Yes, in the next episode, I'm going to talk about how you figure out what types of jobs exist, period, and what types of jobs could get you this money that Hadassah just helped you enumerate. So see you in the next episode when we talk about types of jobs.